Brother Bobby said our 21st lesson, and I've got a note here now on the paper I just noticed, Brother Bobby, so that sounds right. On the kingdom of heaven. We're still in Matthew 20. I've been here for a few weeks. So let's start off by reading our parable again. I appreciate Brother Gary filling in for his labor there. And I've got to listen to that message. I hadn't caught up on all of them yet, but I thank the Lord for that. The Lord really blessed. So thank you, brother, for your effort in that, for God's faithfulness there. Matthew chapter 20, let's begin in verse number 1. For the kingdom of heaven, I'm not turned on here. Matthew 20, verse number 1. For the kingdom of heaven is like unto a man that is an householder, which went out early in the morning to hire laborers into his vineyard. And when he had agreed with the laborers for a penny a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour, and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right I will give you. And they went their way. Again he went out about the sixth and ninth hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and saith unto them, Why stand ye here all the day idle? They say unto him, Because no man hath hired us. He saith unto them, Go ye also into the vineyard, and whatsoever is right, that shall ye receive. Thank you, buddy. So when even was come, the Lord of the vineyard saith unto his steward, Call the laborers, and give them their hire, beginning from the last unto the first. And when they came that were hired about the 11th hour, they received every man a penny. But when the first came, they supposed that they should have received more, and they likewise received every man a penny. And when they had received it, they murmured against the goodman of the house, saying, These last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day. But he answered one of them and said, Friend, I do thee no wrong. Didst not thou agree with me for a penny? Take that thine is, and go thy way. I will give unto this last even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil, because I am good? So the last shall be first, and the first last, for many be called, but few chosen. We looked at everybody laboring, and we kind of considered what these servants that had been working from the beginning of the day had to say, what it would have been like if Christ had said, Don't make them joint heirs with me, right? When he looked at us, none of them have labored as I have, Father. You can't make them joint heirs with me. But that was not the pattern of Christ, was it? We saw that last time. We saw also that all in the kingdom labor. And we saw how we were supposed to labor last time. And wrapped up with the need for us to focus on our own walk. That's what Jesus told Peter. Peter looked at John and said, What about this man? Jesus said, Don't worry about him, right? You just be concerned about your own walk with me. You follow me, Peter. Let's begin in 1 Peter chapter number 3. Speaking of Peter, Peter writes here concerning Christ's pattern. What is the example that Christ left for us? And in 1 Peter 3, in verse number 17, it says, For it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. Why is that better? Because that's the pattern of Jesus Christ, right? Verse 18 says, For Christ also. This is the way Christ was. You want to show Christ to the world, then this is the pattern that you've got to follow. You want to be little Christ? You want to be Christians like you claim to be? Then this is the pattern that you follow. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. So the pattern of Christ is for the just to suffer for the unjust, right? That's what Christ did. Even if it's unfair, can't we suffer wrongfully and still be thankful? That was the pattern of Christ, right? Did he ever suffer at the hand of men rightfully? Not one time, right? We've been rebuked by men, and rightfully so, right? We've done wrong and we've suffered, not like it says in verse 13 that we suffer for well-doing, but we've suffered for evil-doing before, right? But Christ not once, never did. The suffering at the hands of men was always for well-doing. If that's the pattern of Jesus Christ, can't we suffer wrongfully as well and still be thankful and still show Christ and still open not our mouths even as He did? 1 Peter 2:19 says, for this, well, we're right here. Let's go ahead and flip to it. 1 Peter 2:19, verse 18, servants. Who do we have in the parables? We have servants in our parable, right? Literally, it's the word slave. Be subject to your masters with all fear, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the froward, even those that would mistreat you. Be subject to them with all fear. For this is thankworthy, if a man, for conscience toward God, endure grief, suffering wrongfully. So even if it's unfair, what should these guys in the vineyard have done? They should have taken it patiently, right? Even if they had been mistreated, they should have taken it patiently. They should have suffered wrongfully, it says. Because of conscience toward God, they should have endured grief, even if they had been wronged. But was that the case in this particular parable? See, I wanted to establish that. What if it had been like they said, right? What if they really had been mistreated? They still acted out of line, right? They still acted outside of the pattern of Jesus Christ. Even if they had suffered wrongfully, they should have endured grief. They should have taken it patiently. They should have been thankful. But that's not even the case here in this parable, because the master said that he did what was right. Did you catch that? You 11th hour laborers, you come and you serve in my vineyard, and guess what I'll pay you? I will pay you what is right. That's what he said. I'll give you what is right. That's what the master said he would do. So the right thing for him to do was to do what he did. Right? That was the right thing for him to do. It was to do what he did. Jesus, let me show you something real quick. In Matthew chapter 20, in our parable here, the master asked a question down in verse number, let's see. In verse number 15, he says, is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am what? Good. Now this has just come on the heels of Jesus dealing with the rich young ruler. And do you remember what the rich young ruler said when he approached Jesus? Good master. And Jesus said, wait a minute, before you go any further, let's clarify something. There is none good but who? But God. All right? It's no mistake that Jesus teaches this parable right after he's dealt with the rich young ruler. We've already seen that. He said, there's nobody good but God. And now I want to tell you about someone that's good. Right? So who has got to be the master in our parable? It's got to be God, right? Because he just said there is none good but God. Is your eye evil because I am good? Does God do anything wrong? Huh? If he does, he's not God, right? Everything that he does is holy and just and righteous and true and right. Everything. So if God says the right thing for me to do was to give to these 11th hour laborers what I did, then we ought to zip our lips, right? We have no room to complain. What he did was right. Who are we to question the wisdom of God? Do we know better than the Maker? Do we know better than the one that, like I said, he just spoke and the universe was here, right? He does all things well. He works all things after the counsel of his own will. Abraham said, will not the judge of the earth do right? The judge of all, he's the judge of all the earth. Everything that he does is right. God determines what's right. The reason we know what good is because God said it was good. Amen? There is none good but God. God is the definer of what is good. You want to know what's good? Look at God. Right? So who are we? Will we question God's wisdom? Do we know better than God? I have a question for you. Did these laborers that had worked all day long in this vineyard, did they have any idea what it had been like for those 11th hour laborers? They had no idea what the 11th hour laborers had been through. They had no awareness of their struggles. They had no awareness of their tears. They had no awareness of their trials. Why were the 11th hour laborers still there in the 11th hour? Because no man will hire us, Lord. In other words, nobody wants us. Right? Nobody wants us. Maybe they were scrawny and puny, you know? The people go out there to hire people to get in their labor, and they're like, not those guys there, you know? This boy, he's a hoss over here, right? I'm going to take him. Do you remember when you were a kid and you'd divide up into a couple of teams, you know, and you're going to play football, and so they pick a couple of captains. Man, you never wanted to be the last one that was picked, you know? What does that mean? It meant you were the worst player, right? When we play volleyball here, you know, during the chicken burning, we always have to make Brother Gary a captain. Well, the flip side of that is I usually am a captain as well. So we make the ones that would normally get picked last, we make them captains, right, Brother Gary? And then we don't have to worry about that. He didn't say amen. But that's the way it was. I remember that as a kid. I'm sitting there, you know, and I'm like, I hope they don't pick me last. Please pick me. These guys were the ones that were picked. Why are you still here? Because nobody wants us, right? Nobody wants us. These represent the poor and the weak. These represent the ones that in the eyes of men are worthless. Not good for anything. The Lord knows our ability. I still remember Brother Gene talking about his truck, and he went to get all those, I think it was rocks one time, Brother Gene, or dirt or something, and they dumped that stuff on there, and that truck went boom. You can't put, if it's a 2-ton truck, you better not put more than 2 tons on it, right? It's got a limit of what it can handle. God knows our ability. God knows our limits. You know what? Some can handle the heat of the day. Some can handle the labor all day long. Others can only handle 1 hour. The Master knows, right? He knows our ability. He gave us our ability. Those that were able to handle it all day, they weren't able to do it in their own strength, were they? The only reason they could handle it was because God had given them that ability. So God, He would magnify His grace here by giving the same benefit to the weaker that He gave to the strong. Wow. What a master we serve. Such an experience should have made these guys rejoice. Such an experience should have made these men praise the Master, not murmur against Him. What a master we serve. Because listen, if God's not gracious, guess what? None of us are getting in. None of us are getting hired, right? If we don't have a gracious master. They should have rejoiced to see His grace and His mercy bestowed upon the poor and the weak. We ought to rejoice to see God's grace bestowed on the weak and the poor. Look at Deuteronomy 15. You know why the weak and the poor are here? Look at Deuteronomy chapter 15. You remember what the Master asked these guys that had worked all day long when they began to murmur against Him? He said, is your eye evil because I am good? You remember that? Yeah. We're going to see the evil eye right here in this chapter, in this passage. Look at Deuteronomy 15. Why are the weak and the poor here? In Deuteronomy 15 and in verse number 7. If there be among you a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother, but thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need. This guy has need, you see, in that which he wanteth. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year and the year of release is at hand. Remember that in 7 years they had to release from the debt. And thine eye, here it is, and thine eye be what? Evil against thy poor brother. Is your eye evil because I am good? The master asked. Is your eye evil because I am good? And thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him naught, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be sin unto thee. You see, the evil eye, just like in our parable, the evil eye shows no compassion, and the evil eye puts himself first. The evil eye is always looking at others and always sees the fault in others, but never sees the fault in himself. Verse number 10, thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. God said the poor are going to always be with you. Why would God leave the weak and the poor here? Why would God have the poor among us? This is why. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thine hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. God says the poor are never going to cease from among you. The weak are never going to cease from among you, because they are opportunities for the strong. They are opportunities for those that are rich to show the grace of God by assisting those that are weaker. The poor will never cease out of the land. They're your opportunities to declare me. They're your opportunities to show your gracious master. Right? If he's not gracious, none of us are getting in. They're your opportunities to display my grace and my mercy. You say, if I give to this poor man, he won't be able to pay it back. Exactly, right? Jesus said, when you make a feast, what did he say? Don't invite the ones that can invite you over next weekend to their feast, right? Invite the ones that can't pay you back. And I'll give you blessings. And what he said, he said, I will bless thee in all thy works, right? I'll give you treasures in heaven. The poor and the weak are among us, so that we might show the grace of God by assisting those that don't have anything to offer in return. They worked for 1 hour. For 1 hour. Listen, even if we put in a full day's labor, have we really benefited the Lord? What does Acts 17 say about that? What does Acts 17 say? What do we all have to offer God? Nothing. Nothing. How can we benefit God? Is God lacking in any way? No. Nebuchadnezzar, remember when he woke up after he'd been out there chewing grass and his fingernails had grown all long and gnarly, you know, and he's like a beast, acting like a beast, and he wakes up and he says, wow, all men are as nothing before you. You do whatever you please in all the earth. Man doesn't have anything to offer God. Listen to Acts 17 and verse number 24. God that made the world and all things therein. What are you going to give somebody that made all things, huh? What do you have to offer Him? Seeing that He is Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything. God needs nothing. Man is so prideful these days. He thinks he's got something to offer God. Man, if God has me, God's really got something. I'm really doing something for God. There's nothing you can do for God. God needs nothing. We need the right perspective on it. We need to see God in His glory. And you know what men would do then? Then they'd fall down like Isaiah did before him and say, woe is me. I'm a man of unclean lips. Covers his mouth. You've been prophesying for 5 chapters, Isaiah. I'm nothing before Him. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. He's not worshipped with men's hands as though He needed anything, seeing He giveth to all life and breath and all things. You know what? With God, we're always on the receiving end, right? He's the one that's giving. God so loved the world that He gave. For what in return? He said that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly, right? When we had nothing to offer in return. We considered that when we read the parable about the man that owed such a great debt to his master. He could never pay it back. There's nothing he could offer his master. No way that he could benefit him. When it comes to God, we're always on the receiving end. Is your eye evil because I am good? He asks. Because I am good, there is none good but God. God does everything right. Look at Psalm 9 as we start winding up. God alone does everything right. How can we question Him? How can we question His actions? How can we murmur against Him, right? He said they murmured against the goodman of the house. Have we forgotten who He is? Have we forgotten who we're dealing with? Will you complain against God because things didn't work out like you expected them to? Really? Have you forgotten who you're dealing with? In Psalm 9, in verse number 7, but the Lord shall endure how long? Forever. He's always been, y'all. He's always been. He always will be. The Lord shall endure forever. He hath prepared His throne for judgment. He shall judge the world in what? Righteousness. Righteousness. How many judges of the earth do you know that are like that? How many judges in the earth, even the men that are godly men, do you know that always give righteous judgment? That have never passed a wrong verdict? God's got a 100% record, right? Amen. Never one time, never even the smallest fault. Even the smallest indecision. He never reached a situation and He said, man, I've got all the facts presented before me, but I just don't know. Never any doubt. He judgeth. He shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in uprightness. Let me tell you something. Let me just go ahead. If you got any kind of fantasies in your mind, let's dispel all that right now. You're going to stand before God one day. And let me tell you something. When you stand before God, everything that's in the inner recesses of your soul is going to be naked and open before Him. And guess what? You're going to know it. You're going to know that you're standing before... When you see Him, you're going to know that you're standing before Him without excuse. He said in Romans chapter 1, if we just see the things that are made, we were out there skiing, and man, you get up on top of that mountain, and sometimes you were so focused on not falling down and hitting your face that you forget to look around and say, wow, look at this beauty. Look at what God has made. You know, Romans 1 says that you're rendered inexcusable because of that, man. That there's enough of the gospel declared by the creation, by the things that are made, to render man inexcusable because they so clearly declare His eternal power and Godhead. They reveal Him that clearly. You're going to stand before God naked and open. There's not any secrets. There's not any hidden thing. It says the things that we do in secret, God sees it, right? Whether they be good or bad. So He judges in righteousness. He will minister judgment to the people in uprightness. Whenever they see the Lamb in Revelation, is it chapter 6? They call for the rocks and hills to hide them from the wrath of the Lamb. Do you remember that? None of them is standing there going, whoa, wait a minute. No, you don't have the right to judge me. I did this over here, or this is why I did what I did. No, none of them are making excuses. They're just crying out to be covered up because they realize that it's just. They realize that it's righteous. Every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Everyone will know it. Everyone will confess that it's true. He will minister judgment to the people in uprightness.